Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Nocturnal Animals. Now, this is Tom Ford's sophomore film as a director, and most of the time I think a sophomore film for any kind of auteur is the idea to really prove themselves, to make this big artistic, crazy vision type of movie, and to show kind of, I guess, that it wasn't just a fluke or something like that, that they really have it in them to be a real director. And I didn't really doubt that with Tom Ford, and I never thought his second film would falter or anything like that, but I think Nocturnal Animals really does prove that in a certain amount of a way. Although I don't remember The Sickle Man necessarily as well as maybe I should. I liked it quite a bit, but I think Nocturnal Animals is way more of a twisty, dark, nihilistic, strange movie than I really expected from him, especially after A Single Man. It's very much a different kind of film. It's divisive, probably one of the more divisive films I've seen this year, because it seems like some reviews absolutely hate it. I've read reviews that absolutely love it. I've read people go, it's different. And that's kind of what's so awesome about Nocturnal Animals. It can get in its way in other ways, but I think maybe that's just the first time watching it. It's a dense film, and I think maybe even denser as I continue to think about it. I think it might be even denser when I see it a second or third time, if I do get to do those things. And it's the kind of grand, kind of artistic statement that you probably more expect from someone like David Lynch or a true lover of cinema. And I think Tom Ford, if you didn't take him seriously as a director before, I don't think there's any way to go back on that now. It's a really big artistic statement of a movie. It's a weird movie. It's a strange movie. It's a real kind of cinephile auteur kind of sophomore statement of a movie, and that's kind of what's so awesome about it. And I think Tom Ford brings a film that honestly it's kind of almost hard to talk about and interpret, and I kind of understand why the large majority of reviews that are even praising this film don't even really get into it, because it feels like it's impossible to really say what exactly happened within it. Susan, played by Amy Adams, who's an art gallery owner, receives a manuscript for a novel penned by her ex-husband Edward, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, along with an invitation that they could have dinner once he comes to LA after she reads this manuscript, and saying it's a more personal statement and that he really wants her to read it. And the following film is showing her reading the novel, but kind of her interpretation of both that novel and her past relationship with Edward, and how that deteriorated and ended with her ex-husband, and how she wound up with her current husband, who's played by Armie Hammer, as the novel kind of haunts her about her own past. This movie's not the most clear, and to be honest, when I'm reading the plot descriptions, I'm going off of kind of Wikipedia and things, but as someone who, saw the movie and stuff, I didn't feel as clear about it, and I kind of find that quite wonderful about Nocturnal Animals. I mean, I wasn't sure if she was an artist who made the exhibit that she's in at the beginning, or if she owned the gallery. That wasn't entirely clear. There's certain things that are unclear and you're unsure of. And I think that brings up a lot of things about it. I think one of the more interesting things about this film is the idea of interpretation, and you're really seeing someone else's interpretation. I mean, there's basically 3 plot lines, kind of. In certain ways, there's two, if sort of. I mean, I guess there are 3. But there's the present in this film of Amy Adams' character Susan reading the manuscript. Then there's her interpretation of the manuscript, and then there's her remembering her past relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. That brings up all sorts of things that she envisions Jake Gyllenhaal, both her relationship with the character Edward in the past and within the novel. And you could say that's the lame idea of most people go, oh, we'll have the author of the novel in the movie play this character in the book, but that's probably maybe not the interpretation that the author of the novel that she's reading actually meant. It's her version of what she's reading. So it gets into this whole thing. And by the way, you never, spoilers I guess, you never see Jake Gyllenhaal in the plot line where Amy Adams is reading the book. So you actually could even say we don't actually know what he looks like at this time. We could be wrong in that he is actually Jake Gyllenhaal. He could be someone else if you really want to go all crazy movie theory on it and shit. But most likely that is what he looks like, but what he looks like now might be different from that. And it kind of just gets into all these things that you're really seeing through someone's psyche and their interpretation of what's going on. There's certain shots that I'm not exactly sure. There's a whole thing with her daughter. After I saw it, we're debating what that means and what's going on with that. There's various things that mean this and that. It's kind of an interesting thriller. It's an interesting kind of view on how you interpret art and how art can be personal to you, and how someone who created art can mean something personal to you based on their interpretation. how the book seemed to be sort of about her, how she would interpret it to be about her, or is it like that's Carly Simon's song where it's like, you're so vain and stuff, and he knew that she would do that, or it seemed to be that he did write it about what happened to their relationship, and it kind of puts you into this long debate about it, and I think that's kind of interesting, and I like how kind of mean it can be, how sad it can be, how nihilistic, how beautiful. This movie has such an amazing look about it. This was shot by Seamus McGravy, who also shot In the Mood for Love and has done some very beautiful cinematography over the years, but this film almost felt like, if you've ever seen those perfume ads or clothes ads that play before the movies, like the theatrical cuts of a commercial you've seen on TV, and like they look amazingly beautiful and a ton of money was spent on them, and Nocturnal Animals kind of looks like that the entire time. And you could take that as like a diss, like Tom Ford's this fashion designer. If you didn't know, Tom Ford is a fashion designer. How beautifully he composes the shots in this are just spellbinding. It's probably one of the best shot films of the whole year. You'd expect that from Tom Ford. Of course, he can make a very beautiful movie. He makes very beautiful clothes. And if you've seen A Single Man, you can tell he knows how to compose an image. He actually, interestingly enough, didn't use his own clothes, and he didn't style anything. He let a costume designer style it. I think that actually says more about how he composed the image, how he can get that to work, and shows him as both a stylist and a storyteller, and how he can let go of something like that and still make it look like he actually did all the costumes. Because when I was watching it, I was like, well, of course the costumes look beautiful. It's Tom Ford. Maybe the costume designer wanted to bring their A game and like really impress Tom Ford or something. I don't know, but it really looked as beautiful like he actually did. But I think it shows really him as a really amazing, complex storyteller in a way that I think shows off him as a really amazing filmmaker. I felt that way after A Single Man, but I think this like is such a kind of a ginormous leap forward in a very ambitious way. I think I probably think A Single Man is stronger overall, but I think Nocturnal Animals is so ambitious in what it's trying to do. I almost kind of appreciate it more and will probably think about it more. It's one of the few films that I liked reading as many reviews of it as I did, because I could really go into it, rethink about it, and recontextualize things and realize what critics, I'm like, oh, you're kind of dumb, I didn't realize that. And then others like, oh, that's really interesting, you probably overliked it in certain degrees. I don't know if it was entirely as clear, as visually as it pops, and as interesting as it is with these various interpretations that Amy Adams' character is putting on this book and her own past. And I liked how Tom Ford like shot one, like I've heard it compared to like Sam Peckinpah. It looked like if Sam Peckinpah had like beautiful, gorgeous cinematography by someone who like, you know, was like a fashion designer or something. It was weird. Like Sam Peckinpah is usually more grittier and such. It looked, well, I guess it really looked like if Sam Peckinpah shot his films like a beautiful like VistaVision John Ford type thing or something. It was like very interesting in a lot of ways. It shows Tom Ford's clearly a fan of a lot of interesting European auteurs. He's clearly a fan of a lot of interesting things about cinema and how he really used that to use various interpretations. Even the idea of having like Amy Adams and Isla Fisher kind of being a surrogate for Amy Adams, which is a very kind of meta weird thing, which is also kind of funny and cute. How he uses all his images and how he's saying all these things about interpretation and art. A lot of complex ideas in this. I kind of like all that from him. I like that he didn't take an easy way out. Clearly he can make any movie he probably wants at this point, so that's kind of cool to see someone actually do that. I think one of the things I've taken away most from 2016 is seeing interesting directors like Paul Verhoeven or Park Chan-wook, even Tom Ford with this, being directors that like, you know, I can do whatever I want. Why should I compromise to a certain degree and make kind of an interesting, weird movie that no one else could make? I think I probably like Elle and the Handmaiden a lot more than Nocturnal Animals in that regard, but I think Nocturnal Animals does it in its own beautiful, odd, unique, dark, sinister kind of a way. And I like the performance by Amy Adams. I think the interesting thing about this year with Arrival and Nocturnal Animals is she really has like a real warm presence about her, but she kind of like takes all of that away almost in Nocturnal Animals. She feels very cold and sad and darker kind of sadness to her that I don't think you could really expect from her from previous performances, but it shows like Amy Adams is probably one of the best actresses we have right now, and this shows like how good she is that she could do something like this. I think Arrival shows that as well, but I think Nocturnal Animals shows it probably even more. It's probably one of those performances that people don't entirely appreciate, but really it's the glue that sticks the whole movie together, so it's probably more important than you ever realize. Jake Gyllenhaal, that performance is particularly interesting because he's playing like two different roles, and how how it's kind of her view of this guy and his writing. That's an interesting way to play. I think Jake Gyllenhaal was really good. Michael Shannon's great and everything, but particularly there's a scene where he like stops giving a shit. At that point, I think he's like even better than the rest of the whole movie somehow. It's like his performance suddenly went up a tick and it became a lot funnier. The one actor who I've never really liked that much in anything usually is Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's never really stuck out to me, and I often wonder why like they cast him in things, because he's usually pretty bland. But in this, he was very good, very frightening and scary and really intimidating, and really much like that shitty bully from your high school who, when you think about it, just makes you mad. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson did an amazing job, and it's the first time I've really seen him as a really great actor, and I think he probably steals the movie more because I thought so little of him, but it's just a really scary, spooky performance. Plays a total shithead probably better than I thought he ever could. I think Nocturnal Animals is not for everyone, and it's not really a mainstream movie. I mean, it has a lot of movie stars in it, and it has more money behind it than this kind of thing usually has, which is wonderful and what makes it so beautiful and stylized. And I think Tom Ford's really good at that. This really makes me wish Tom Ford made movies more often, but I think if he's going to make ones as interesting and complex, and ones that keep making me think about how he told the story and what the story says and various things about it, and how I'm still like, I don't know what that phone call with the daughter, like where that was going with that, and there's like many questions I have from watching this film. And honestly, I think if I watched it again, not everything would be answered. It has a bit of a Mulholland Drive vibe to it, a Lynchian vibe, but not in the way that when people rip off Lynch in a style way. I think in terms of how he told the story and what it says about him using that various story, and I think it's very much the ideas of postmodernism that maybe I'm personally interested in, but I think a lot of filmmakers and storytellers are particularly interested in how we're using our interpretations of pop culture and what that says about us as people, rather than just, you know, doing kind of a reboot or something like that, or merging two styles. I think this kind of shows more of the interesting ways you can use postmodernism to marry between, you know, an idea of kind of a darker West Texas kind of thriller type of idea, to like a rich gallery owner reading that idea in a book, to her examining her past. It just goes into all those different things, and I don't know if it's entirely clear. Part of me doesn't think it works, another part of me thinks it works in mysterious ways that I'm yet to uncover, like it's like an interesting treasure chest of a mystery that I have to kind of dive in several times to really kind of unlock and figure out what's going on. But it was so beautiful and surprising. I'm kind of just very happy with it. When I first left it, I wasn't as impressed with it as I keep thinking about it, and when I really like sit down and kind of contemplate what this movie was, I kind of get more and more interested in it in a lot of ways, which I think speaks very highly for a film that you can still think about it in such rich detail and think of all the images and think of all the ideas it was trying to say. There's not a lot of movies that in general do that at all, or can even hold up to that when you're really questioning all these ideas and how it's telling its story. Is something I think like shows Tom Ford is probably one of the better filmmakers working today, and somebody I wish who would make more movies, although he seems to be an amazingly creative, awesome person, not just for his movies, but his clothes look pretty nice too, although I don't own any because I think they're expensive. I didn't look that up. But Nocturnal Animals is probably the deep dive kind of cinephile, kind of a twisty turny film that maybe it won't make your top 10 list, and maybe it's not something that everyone will be talking about necessarily, but it's the kind of film that is an interesting watch and an interesting thing to contemplate. And I think leaving a movie with that kind of a feeling is a really wonderful, amazing thing. And for a director to leave me with this many questions and this many thoughts from his second film makes me very curious for what the rest of his filmography will be, and really highlights the beautiful future that we'll see from the filmography of Tom Ford, and a really exciting one at that. I find this to be a really interesting, odd movie that will probably get lost in the shuffle, but one that probably shouldn't. It's a really dense, interesting film that is probably without definition and without a true interpretation, but maybe that's kind of what it's all going for. And what makes Nocturnal Animals so awesome and unique is kind of also what makes it uninterpretable and undefinable. So if you've seen Nocturnal Animals and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.